Mass is how much stuff is in something.
Gravity is how much force the earth pulls object.
Gravity is the force in which the earth pulls an object.
A force is a push or a pull.
Push or pull.
Push or pull.
Push or pull.
Push or pull.
So the concept that we are going to cover today is applied force. Applied force is when you add a force to an object to make it move. The first law of motion in it, Newton says that if an object is not moving unless there's a force that moves it, it will not move. Remember, this is called inertia. However, the second law of motion says that you can actually change this. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you know this, right? Because if I have this board eraser right here, I could make it move. And how do I make it move? Well, I can push it, like that. I can move it like that, like that. In our case, with something this light, the applied force and the total force will kind of match up. Now let's just assume that there's no friction, and there really isn't too much friction going on this table right here. But what would happen then let's say I move this with a force of, let's make a number up, 8 newtons. If I push it with the force of 8 newtons, then it should look like it's moving at a force of 8 newtons. Because there's not much force pushing it back, then the applied force and the total force is kind of the same. But let's take a look at what happens if there is an opposing force. This is where math kind of comes into play. So let's say I am pushing this with a force of 8 newtons, but then another force comes in and pushes back at a force of, let's say, 6 newtons. Now, you could do the math and you could actually figure out what the total force is. The total force is what you actually see here. So for example, you can't really see that I'm pushing with a force of 8 newtons. And you can't really see that I'm pushing back with a force of 2 newtons. But you can kind of tell the difference. Assuming that there's no force pushing it back, if that's what 8 newtons looks like, if I'm pushing back with a force of 6 newtons, you could see that this eraser is now moving at a quarter of its original speed. So now it looks like it's moving only at 2 newtons. You have the original force, or the applied force, and then you have the opposing applied force, right? That's when you're pushing back. And so now if you subtract 8 minus 6, then what you get is a net force, or a total force of 2 at the end. And so to anybody who's watching, you could see that it looks like it is traveling at a force of 2 newtons. So now we are going to use the help of some second grade teachers to explain how this concept works.
If forces are opposite, okay, if forces are opposite, you subtract.
Yeah.
Got it.
Good. Say it one more time.
Okay, if forces are opposite, subtract.
If forces are opposite, you subtract!
If forces are opposite, you subtract.
So just to recap, all you have to do is take one applied force, take the other applied force, and you just have to subtract the numbers if they are pushing against each other. Now what would happen if we were pushing towards the same distance? What happens then? Well, if you take a look, if I'm pushing at a rate or with a force of 8 newtons, I could also add another force of 6 newtons And what ends up happening is this eraser can move a lot faster. If that is the case, then what order of operation do you think you need to use for this one? If you answered addition, that is correct. You are supposed to add them. Just think of it, right? The force of 8 newtons is supported by a force of 6 newtons, and so it adds on to the strength. If they're opposing each other, then they should be subtracted. But if they're helping each other out, then they should be added, because now the force is a lot stronger than it was. A way that you can apply this is think about when you're moving furniture. Think about the time where your parents would call you down just to help move a certain piece of furniture. The reason why they call you down is so that you can help them move the object a lot faster, a lot easier. And this is because you are adding force onto whatever force your parents already had. So if they were already pushing at a force of 10 newtons, if you came in with a force of 5 newtons and you helped them push whatever object, you both now have a combined energy or strength or force of 15 newtons.